My name is Michael Koplow. I'm the Policy Director for the Israel Policy Forum, and I am joined today by three wonderful panelists. All the way here on, I guess, my left, but your right, Batya Ungar Sargon. She is the opinion editor for The Forward. Next to her is Sara Cohen. She is the chairwoman of My Israel and is also a columnist for Makor Rishon. And next to her, we have Noah Landau, who is a diplomatic correspondent for Haaretz and also a member of Haaretz editorial board. So I think we'll dive right in. And I want to ask all of you, and we can start with Batya and then move down. This panel is premised on the notion that there is indeed a generational divide on Israel. That particularly in the United States, younger American Jews feel differently about Israel than older generations of American Jews. And so I'm wondering from all three of you, do you actually think that's correct? And if you do, what do you think is driving it? And if not, why not?
So first of all, thank you to Z3 for having me. I'm truly humbled to be here speaking to you. Thank you to the Israel Policy Forum for having me. I'm very surprised that they're having me on another generational divide panel because I'm a huge generational divide skeptic. So thank you for knowing that about me and letting me come here and spew my skepticism. I just don't buy this whole generational divide stuff. I think it's like a lot of hysteria. 95% of American Jews, when they're polled, they say that they have a favorable view of Israel, that they're pro-Israel. Only 3% say that they are not pro-Israel. So to me, it's like we're talking about 3% of the population who's not pro-Israel or have a favorable view of Israel. And I can tell you personally, like, they're not all young, there's like a lot of old people who in that, 3% anti-Zionist portion of our community. Now, they are part of our community. They are an important part of our community, but they're 3% of our community. So I just feel extremely skeptical about all the hysteria around that the young people are turning against Israel. Like, it's the job of young people to be wrong about things, right? It's their job to get it wrong, to be extremists, to be little, like, woke Khmer Rouge is what we call them in my household. And it's just sort of like, that's their job. But the polling shows that it just doesn't stick. That there's a level to which American Jews, I think, don't really feel that we have a choice about whether or not to be pro-Israel or to be connected to Israel. So I'm kind of extremely skeptical about all of the hysteria around it, but maybe my co-panelists feel differently.
So I don't like hysteria in any level of my life, but I'm less optimistic. And my professional field is not the American young generation, but more the Israeli young generation. And I think that when you talk about divide, about the growing gap, it has two sides. It has the American or the diaspora Jewish community side, and there's another side, the Israeli side. And I do think that the gap is widening, from both directions. And I'm afraid that the discussion is not being held between two. I just spoke about it in another panel, so sorry for whoever was there. But for two vectors that are going to different directions, when the Israeli public is going more conservative, like center-right, it's a progress. It's not, it's not in Hebrew we say zbeng v'gamarnu. It's not a one-day change, but it is the direction of like demography and the Israeli politics in nowadays. And on the other side, when I try to understand, and I admit that I don't fully understand the processes that are going through the through the Jewish community, Jewish communities in North America or in other places. I'm trying to read. I'm trying to hear different opinions, but I do think that they go more to the liberal side. Now, these are the two vectors that are not in the same direction. I'm afraid they're growing exponentially, and unfortunately, I don't see a lot of patience in, you know what, in the Israeli side. I don't see a lot of patience for political disagreements. So people are very short with their hand on the divorce. Okay, we don't agree upon, I don't know, the future of Judea and Samaria. Okay, so go to hell. I mean, people are I don't see a lot of patience within my home base, basically. And I also don't feel any understanding of my political view on the American side. So I said on the other panel, this is what I'm here for. But I'm not that optimistic like Batya.
So, hi everyone. Anyone here reads Haaretz, by the way? Just so I have, oh, wonderful, okay. The funny thing about numbers, right, is that they say what you want them to say. So it was, as I was looking for data on this issue, because I'm not the expert of the question about the generational gap within American Jews, so I was looking for data, and I saw that basically you can find anything that you want on this issue. You can claim that there is a generational gap, you can claim that there isn't, all the numbers exist. But I do think that maybe on a more psychological level, if we just take the numbers aside for a second, it is more difficult, I think, for younger Jews in America to talk about Israel than it was maybe for their parents. Not talking about the grandparents, that's a different issue. But if we think about what Israel was when it was established for the parents' generation, and when all of their friends went to the kibbutz to pick oranges, and it was the right liberal thing to do, and how it looks now for many of the younger people when they speak to their friends about Israel. So besides the numbers, I think it's also, there are new challenges for younger people in America to be engaged with Israel, which of course is not new to all of you who come to these conferences and hear those panels many times. But if you want to speak about the gap between young American Jews and young Israelis, or generational gap, if we look at both countries, which, is it your next question?
You can take it
Yeah, okay.
now. Go ahead.
Because if it's a question, I'll save it. But that I do have a lot to say about. So first of all, since it's a Jewish conference, so we'll start, of course, with the Holocaust. It was Professor Yehuda Elkanah who said once that from Auschwitz we had two kinds of people emerge. You had those who said, this will never happen again, and those who said, this will never happen to us again. Metaphorically speaking, I think that many from the first group, the universal message, came to America on some level. Many who took the particular message are now more representing the thoughts in Israel about this issue. And when you think about young American Jews, how they were raised in America, which is multicultural, and has shared traumas, different ones than Israel, like slavery, for example. And a young Israeli who is not in a multicultural environment, but in a melting pot, and is the majority when American Jews are a minority. Then you see that this is really a different environment to grow in and to think about Israel in. So young Israelis, I agree totally with Sara, are more conservative. They're shifting to the right, while I think young Americans are more on the left than their parents, probably. I don't know if it's because, the younger people are always more revolutionary. I'm not sure. I mean, we'll only know when this generation grows, right? We'll know later if they really went to the left or it's just a trend that will change. But we see that because young American Jews are in this different multicultural, more liberal environment, and if you look at the data, I mean, this is totally obvious, right? I looked at some of these numbers, and I saw that, for example, in Israel, only 8% define themselves as leftists, 8%. And if you look at America, how many Jews describe themselves as leftists? It's almost 50%. So this is, I mean, this is clear that this is a totally different environment. And also, they don't understand each other. So if you look at, this one I think was interesting. Anyone here knows what most American Jews thought was the most problematic for Israelis? What most Israelis thought was their biggest problem? So definitely not the occupation. Most of them said, most Israelis said that it was the economy, way before security, which is what most Americans thought, American Jews thought. But how many do you think of American Jews actually answered the economy as the #1 problem for Israelis? 1%. So this is how much we don't understand each other. It's quite overwhelming. And I also have a solution, but that must be your next question.
So let's go. Well, let's leave solutions for a couple of minutes. So, you know, Noah talked about a lot of different structural issues. Sara, it sounds like you focus more on the political issues, right? That Israelis are moving politically right and American Jews are moving politically left. In your view, is this something, I guess, do you think this is a recent phenomenon, or is this just the culmination of 7 decades of the two sides moving apart? And do you see any prospect for the two sides moving together politically in the future, or do you think they're just destined to keep on going off in different directions?
I don't think we need to think the same. Sorry, I have a mic. The guy from the technical part asked me to be special. I don't know. It's not a recent phenomenon. I think it's years that it's a process. I mean, society doesn't turn to the more conservative side at a glance, right? It takes time. It takes, demography, it takes processes. The Israeli public is very well experienced, is very smart, even though Europeans usually refer us as natives that don't understand what's good for them. But Israelis are very smart, very well experienced. We experienced the Oslo years. We experienced 2 intifadas. We experienced the disengagement. We actually live these dilemmas every day. And the Israeli younger generation is going, as I see it, more to the conservative side. As Noah just spoke about it, so I don't want to repeat it. But I don't think that in order to build bridges, you need to agree and to think the same. I have a lot of, I just had a group when I was in maternity leave 9 months ago. I met a group voluntarily with my baby of Americans, non-Jewish leaders, more on the progressive side. And one of their questions was, do you have friends on the left side of the political map? And I said, what do you mean, do I have friends? Of course I have friends. Like, my best friend is voting for Meretz, which is far away from me. So we don't talk about politics. And after the panel, one came to me and told me, you know what? That's amazing how natural you said it, because in America, I don't even know people who think different than me. So I don't know about them. I know about us that it's possible, and this is why I'm here for it. And I think it's not only possible, we have to do it. I mean, we have to build these bridges, because this is like, I wrote myself that my self, where I come from, is a very basic thing of arvut adadit, the mutual responsibility. It's a very fundamental Jewish matter. It's written in Sefer Bereshit, et achai anochi mevakesh. So this is the basic of the Jewish people. We cannot give up upon each other, even if we disagree. Now, the second point is there are gaps and disagreements, and we need to give these gaps and these issues, we need to give them a place of honor, and we need to discuss, and we don't need to play the blame game that I feel that usually is being played between Israel and diaspora. So you're responsible for the gap. I'll tell you a short story. So we put up a post in our Facebook page. We have around 170,000 followers on our Facebook page of Israel Shalima Israel. We put up a post that on the day of 1 year for Pittsburgh terror attack. And we said, we did this very nice graphic, and we said, we stand with you, you're our brothers and sisters, and we remember. And we got a message, a private message to our Facebook page from a very intelligent guy. Like, he was not like barbaric, he didn't curse, he said, why should we be care about the Jews in America when they are only like going to the left, only go to J Street, only go to NIF, blah, blah, blah. And like he didn't write it as a comment. He wrote it he really wanted an answer, not just to punch. And this is what I want to change. That we have something in common. We're all Jews, we're the same people. And even if we disagree, we have to talk with each other.
So, Batya, as a divide skeptic, we're sitting here at a conference that in many ways is dedicated to this notion that there is a divide, and I think that...
Because it will not surprise you to learn that I think that the discourse around the divide between Israel and the diaspora is also hysteria.
So talk about that, but before you talk about that, I'm curious if you have any thoughts as to why so many people think there is a divide. If, when you look at, like, as you said, if 95% of American Jews describe themselves as pro-Israel, why do you think this divide rhetoric is so in the air?
Sorry, but what is to be pro-Israel? I mean, isn't that
that's
the whole...
That's a good question, too.
These are the problems of the luckiest Jews in history, in world history. We are the luckiest Jews of world history with very little to worry about. So we worry about this. It will not surprise you to learn that 200 years ago, Jews who disagreed with each other actually killed each other, Like, maybe it will surprise you to learn that, but we are living in such a blessed time that these kinds of debates that are completely normal and natural in a demos, in a nation, which is what we are, that we sort of get up in arms over this stuff. I would hazard to you there is more that divides Trump-voting Jews in America from non-Trump voting Jews in America than there are that divide American Jews from Israeli Jews, right? Just think about how much you hate those Jews, who have the chutzpah, right? So when we think about this stuff, I just don't see like these major divides. I think the reason that we think that this is a huge divide is because of our privilege and our power and our luck, which I'm so grateful for. I mean, my grandfather survived the Holocaust, is still alive, so I don't take any of that for granted. What I do think is that at the end of the day, the American Jewish community, I have bad news for you, which is that the older Jews are also moving to the left. That's what the polling shows. And why are they moving to the left, right? Why are we living in a time where even older Jews are becoming extremely left-wing? Because of our president, right? Like,
what do you mean by even?
I'm sorry. This is the divide. What about the divide? They've always been on the left. However, more Jews now define themselves as left than ever before, and that has been a radical shift in the last 3 years. And this gets back to a very important point, which is that when people who are not Palestinian and not Israeli talk about Israel, they are not talking about Israel. They are talking about themselves. Right?
Wait, but just to clarify, so when you say that older Jews are moving to the left, do you mean with regard to Israel, or do you mean politically in general?
Politically in general. So that's another reason why I'm so skeptical about this divide talk. Like, you're all moving to the left, right? We're all collectively in response to the president shifting our politics. And what that means is that in 5 years, when there's a Democrat in office, right, we will shift back to the center, right? Sorry, that's how I see things, but we will shift back to the center. And it's another reason why I don't believe in the divide is because like older Jews, you've never seen them so willing to criticize Israel. And the reason they're doing that is they're talking about themselves. They're talking about how they feel about Trump, who's so close with Bibi, who's made Israel his pet project, which was really mortifying to most of us, right? He took the thing that we feel really close to and made it his project. You know, his stain kind of suddenly was like, I mean, it was suddenly we started to see Israel through the Trump lens, the way we see everything. And so all of this sort of shift to the left that's happening is much more, I think, a reflection of how we view our own political moment than it is how we view other Jews, who we will never not feel attached to and part of a nation with.
No, I'm curious on that point. There have now been 2 American presidents in a row who have, in some ways, been controversial when it comes to Israel. President Obama, who was not liked by most Israelis, and President Trump, who is very well liked by most Israelis. And I'm curious if you detect something different during the last 2 presidencies in terms of how Israelis perceive American Jews, and if they perceive American Jewish support being driven by presidents, or whether there's something deeper at work here, right? If Batya's thesis about any divide that may or may not exist being a function simply of just who's in the Oval Office, if you're feeling that on the Israeli side of the ocean as well.
So first of all, I didn't see any polls on which president the Israelis like the most. You know, sometimes we just say these things because, yeah.
I mean, I've seen lots of polls, and
yeah.
Yes.
But in any case, when I just came into this room, I heard a conversation when I was waiting, and someone said, someone was asking someone, why do Israelis like Trump so much? Why do they support him so much? And she was, but the point is not, I think, the answer. I mean, from my point of view, the point is that she was really, I mean, I heard the frustration in that question. The question wasn't necessarily about the answer, but it was an expression of the frustration. Why is Israel so much pro-Trump? So I think, I mean, I don't know, how do we define the divide? It's for sure, it's divisive. I mean, there's something there when people are asking, why is Israel supporting this president that we so much don't like? I don't know if this is something that, will indeed just go away if there will be a different president, or it shows that there is something fundamental here that we're debating. And we didn't say anything about religious pluralism, for example, which it's a real issue. It's not just about a question, philosophical question about younger and older generations. This is a real issue. Are Reform and conservative rabbis recognized in Israel or not? Can you teach it in schools? Can I sit next to my partner in a regular shul in Israel, or what? All these questions that are that they do exist, and we do differ on these issues. So I mean, I might be a little skeptical about panels about the generational gap, especially because I don't see a lot of younger people attending these events. Sorry. So this is also a question. Do we need to do all these panels about younger people not being engaged, and then they never come because this is not the sort of thing that younger people want to do? But I do think it's a real issue. And there are major differences. And regarding the president, look, I'll tell you a secret. Israel and the Israeli establishment and the Israeli government, and one dude sitting, on top of that government, Bibi Netanyahu, refusing to let go, they're not all that excited about all of Trump's policies. There's a lot of double speech around these issues. You can see that, for example, President Trump decides to cut the aid to Palestinian security forces, and then Israel sent people, to whisper on his people's ears that actually we don't really want you to do that. That's a little bit risky for us because, they do maintain stability and security, and it's important to fund them. And then, according to recent reports, Trump said, well, Bibi should fund it if it's important to him. He should pay for it. And it's not only that issue. It was the same with other issues. So, it's true that it looks like the Israeli government supports everything that Trump does. With a guy like Trump, you probably should, right? I don't know if you saw that they built this whole new ghost town, and they called it Trump Heights, and they made all this gold. They know how to treat him, but I'm sure they have some kind of a psychological report, but it doesn't mean they actually agree with all of his policies, and some of them, even the Israeli government thinks that they're risky. So it's a little bit more complex, I think, than total support.
I just want to respond to it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something Noah said. I don't mean to suggest that we don't have differences with our Israeli brothers and sisters. As an American Jew, I obviously think the occupation is a deeply, deeply urgent issue, and it bothers me at a very personal and very Jewish level. And I also think that the religious pluralism bothers me very much, that I have less religious freedom as a conservative Jew in the Jewish state than I do in America. I think those are really problematic issues, but there's a certain level of dissent that a democracy, as Spencer pointed out, that a democracy has to be able to sustain, that a nation has to be able to sustain within it. And I just don't think that we have reached the level of breaking or anything even close to the kinds of dissent that the nation of the Jews has sustained in its past and its history. We're so much closer than we've ever been, despite these huge differences and these huge, issues. You think about America, we're engaged in a perfectly, I'm gonna get clobbered for this, but we have major issues here like abortion and gun control, where we really, really, really disagree with our, fellow, Americans, but that doesn't mean that we're not one nation or that we're not in America. A democracy has to be, the whole point of it is that it can sustain a certain amount of dissent. But I agree with you that there are obviously big differences between our communities.
Sara, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about obligations that either side owes to the other. Are there obligations that American Jews owe to their Israeli counterparts? Are there obligations that Israeli Jews owe to their American counterparts?
So let me read, because I put a lot of thought on these panels. Really, I'm also on jet lag, so all night I'm okay, what am I going to say? But I do want to say that the whole world is becoming more global village, but there is a fraction between Jewish diaspora and these Jewish Israelis, and so locality still matters. And now it doesn't mean that there is no value to the Jewish communities in diaspora, but there is one very central focus here, which is the most dramatic historical chapter written in the history of the Jewish people, and it's happening in Israel. So I said it on the last panel, we just read the last parasha is Lech Lecha, and for 2,000 years, the Jewish tradition aimed to Eretz Israel to build a nation, to build a country, to build a state, and it's happening in front of our eyes. It's happening in front of your eyes. It's happening in my life, and that's the most dramatic. It's not about prophecy. It's not about wishes. It's not about prayers. It actually happens. So that's the most dramatic thing happens in our generation, and we're so lucky to have it. I totally agree with you that it's a privileged discourse that we're having now, because look what we're talking about: relationship between two big thriving communities. We're so lucky to have this conversation. So that's about proportion. We need to look how lucky we are. But I do think that the most important thing happens today is this dramatic thing of a sovereign state in Israel. Now, it's the only democracy in the Middle East. You can say it's not perfect, whatever. The U.S. is not perfect as well, as you just said. I don't know any democracy that is perfect. We can always improve our democracy, but it's the only democracy in the Middle East. And look on our surrounding. I mean, we actually live in a jungle. And we succeed to build a thriving economy, a flourishing democracy, and that's a success story. And the Jewish communities around the world, and especially in the US, has a very important part of it. And we should build this connection. And even if you're optimistic about the gap, I mean, that's something you always have to facilitate, the connection between the two very different communities.
Noah, you would, in the beginning, you said you had answers to the problem, how we can bridge this divide. So.
Yes, and in America they always say in a minute or less, you know, give us the solution.
You can take more than a minute if you like.
So this is usually where I say the most basic responsibility that we have for each other as a Jewish nation is at least as thoughtful people to be informed, right? So this is like the perfect pitch where I say, and read Haaretz because you can be informed. But I just thought about it so this is what I usually say, but I thought about it when I was here at the conference today, that there's another issue, which is the issue that people talk a lot about now, which is the shrinking tent. So because the conversation is polarized, another trending word, what happens is that in spaces like this one, this conference today, there's a tendency to avoid any controversy. There's a tendency to say, okay, because everything is so polarized and everything is so difficult, let's shrink the tent. Let's bring in the people that are most, that will not annoy anyone specifically, and not our donors. This is something I see not only here, and I'm not, this is a great conference, and 1,000 people came, which is amazing. But still, I see that in many conferences on the issue. Let's just try not to annoy anyone too much and bring in all the people that say nice thing, and all the panels are, very civilized. No one argues with anyone so much. And this is so Jewish to argue. This is if there's anything that is really like Jewish tradition is to really argue with each other, right? This is how, this is the Talmud. This is everything that we did for many generations. So I think there is a responsibility not to be so much afraid of arguing with each other and inviting those people that, not only the divide skepticals, as much as it's, there are people who are skeptical of bigger things, and we shouldn't be afraid of bringing them in to speak at conferences like this one.
So I totally agree. As the opinion editor of the most diverse opinion section, I believe, in the nation, I completely agree with you. I would say I want to suggest a different kind of connection that our communities have. Hannah Arendt said at one point that you can be safe as a minority in a country as long as your people are the majority in some other country. That's really the thing that protects you as a minority. If you don't have that, you have essentially what the African American community has here, where there's no sort of external person responsible or entity responsible for their well-being. And I would like to suggest that in 1967, that's essentially what we got. Not quite in 1948, because Israel wasn't sure that it would survive. But after 1967, it became extremely clear that there was a very powerful other country where we were the majority that was going to come and make problems for Americans if they didn't protect us and protect our rights. And Israel's strength, and its very human nature, it changed the way Americans viewed American Jews. We before were kind of like a tolerated / kind of not really respected minority, and after 1967, we truly started to become what we are now, which is a deeply, deeply beloved, protected minority. And in that sense, I think what Israel truly gave us was American citizenship. But beyond that, American Jews are the promise of a liberal democracy democracy fulfilled. That is our role on this planet. We prove that democracy can protect minorities. And I think we are the best example of that, and maybe even like the only true example of that, of a minority who can feel so safe. Of course, now we're having this rise of anti-Semitism, and it's terrible, but look at how our elected officials are responding to that with horror, right? We are very cherished here. And as such, we are this promise of liberal democracy fulfilled. And I think that that is the thing that I wish Israelis would learn when they look at us, that they would learn how important a liberal democracy is, how important the protection of minorities are, because we truly are like a living monument to the most important institution in the world. Maybe religion would be this, second competing. So while we of course need to have more compassion for things like the Second Intifada and the deep psychological wounds that Israelis live with and the real threats, I think that the image of the American Jewish community is that promise of a liberal democracy fulfilled, and it's something that I think Israel could stand to think a little bit more about.
Sarah, did you want to respond?
I'm going to repeat what I said on the other panel because I think it's very important. I want to explain why I'm here. So I'm a mother of 4 beautiful kids, and I hate going away from them. My youngest is 9 months. כל הכבוד לי. I'm a very brave woman. No, and I have a great husband. And I hate going away from them. I refuse every offer to go abroad, and I did it because Amitai, the one who organized this conference, he told me, listen, we need people from the right-wing side. I have tons of lefties. I need people from the right, and I want you to come. So, so I didn't come because he requested so nicely. I came because I think it's important, and I came because I think that the more liberal community in the States don't hear our voice, and vice versa. I don't think you really genuinely hear our voice. Like I grew up as a non-religious girl in a kind of religious settlement. It's called Kiryat Arba, next to Hebron. My grandfather was one of the founders. Don't swallow your tongue. Okay. My grandfather was one of the founders of Kiryat Arba, and I'm proudly, waving this flag. And I'm a great supporter of the settlement or across the Green Line project, if you want to call it like this. And usually when groups from abroad come to Israel, from especially the US and Canada, they bring me as a token, as a leaf. We need someone from the right. You're a woman. You speak nicely. You have a nice smile. And you on the right side. So, okay, let's bring and make, a tick. And then they see me as an alien. Okay. I spoke with a few groups, one of them a day before I came here. And they see me as an extremist alien that supports sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and they don't understand my views. Now, I'm not a minority in Israel at all. The direction is growing. Like there was a poll last elections. I think it was the second elections. The Israeli Democracy Institute made it. It's not a right-wing institute, okay? It's on the left. And they asked various questions. One of them was on the conflict. And they asked, do you support Israeli sovereignty, Israel implement sovereignty over the Area C? Area C is 60% of Judea and Samaria. That's a lot, okay? And 48% of the people who were asked said they support. That's a lot of people. You wouldn't see it a decade ago. Now, that's the direction that the Israeli public is going to. Now, I'm not just a reporter. I'm pushing for this direction out of a very complex point of view, very responsible point of view. I wrote a whole research about it. We made a whole conference last year. We held a very popular conference last year in Jerusalem. Now, this is the direction I'm pushing to.
Could I ask, like, do you want, like, the Palestinians living there to have civil rights under that Israeli sovereignty?
Wherever, well, it's a very complex issue, so we can talk about it
Actually,
the whole
it's yes
day.
or no.
But no, it's actually not yes or no, but wherever Israel implement the sovereignty, yes. So we should offer citizenship to the Palestinians. Area C, there are approximately 150,000 Palestinians, plus minus, nobody really counted. But yes, the answer is yes. Now, am I looking for the easy solution? The answer is no. But I'm looking for a very complex solution. I don't like the word solution. You know, solutions you have in math. In geopolitical issues, it's more complex, especially in the Middle East. So, and the reason I'm here is because I stand on the right, and I'm not, I'm trying to be reasoned. I'm trying to be unapologetic because these are my beliefs. And I feel that there is a very big lack of conversation between us. So this is why I made this 14 hours flight and left my kids at home, and I, miss them every minute. But this is why, because I think we don't talk with each other. You don't talk with me, you talk about me, not about Sara, okay? About the
You don't talk to your friend from Meretz. Your best friend from Meretz.
Oh, we do. Oh, believe me, I talk with lefties all the time.
You just said before that.
Hang on, hang on.
Yeah, because we're getting into a fight. But whatever, we are. I'm talking to people who don't agree with me all the time. They're talking to me all the time. But every in a couple, you need to know your advantages and your disadvantages. So with my bestie, we put that aside. So I feel there's a lack of discussion, and this is why I'm here. Okay, when you talk about the tent.
Okay, so questions we have about 10 minutes for questions. Please make your question brief, and more importantly, please make sure your question has a question mark at the end of it. Right over here.
So I want to ask the question of Dr. Batya because I was shocked by your statement. I have a feeling that you're out of touch with reality. Have you been at UC Berkeley? Have you been at UCSF? Have you seen how many young people are against Israel? I don't know how you can say, oh, we don't have an issue.
Why don't we ask them? They're right there.
Not only am I aware of it, but I was protested about a month ago while trying to talk about anti-Semitism by Students for Justice in Palestine. So that I'm very aware of it. But to me, that's, first of all, that happens at a tiny portion of the elite of the elite of the elite. There is no chapter, there's no BDS support at community colleges, at state colleges, at 95%, yes it is, at 95% of institutes for higher institutions, this is just not happening. But of course, as a member of the press, I can tell you, when this kind of thing happens, as it happened to me, it gets a lot of attention because it's shocking, and that's how news works. But at 95% of institutions of higher learning, there is no BDS, there's no pro-Israel activity, it's just not there. This is happening only at a very small percentage of elite institutions.
Sorry, no, yeah, over here.
I would like to cede my time to the kids that came here from Berkeley to talk about their experience.
Yes.
Would anybody care to talk about what it's like dealing with anti-Semitism? Have you seen your friends been turned away from their own identities? That's a different issue.
Except that's not. This is an important discussion, but it's not. That's not what this is. So.
Batya, are you an expert on the identity of the young people on whose behalf you come to speak on in such Pollyanna and glowing terms? They're right here. I don't understand why no one is asking them what their experience is like and why you think you're the author of their experience.
Once again, I'm not sure that's a. I'm not sure that's a question. A question for this. There was a hand in the back, please. Yeah.
They want to ask a question, though. One of them, at least.
If they have a question, I don't.
If it's a question related to something that was set up here, sure, but
Yeah, I would also just like to ask about like the presence of, if not now, on campus, and also Jewish Voice for Peace, because I agree that BDS isn't as much of a problem anymore on campus. But I think two of the major problems we're seeing on campus now are institutionalized anti-Semitism with the professors, but also like rising or like not anti-Semitism, but the growth of these groups such as If Not Now and JVP. And I also just wanted to ask, because I've actually read your article, Young Jews Are Actually Winning the Generational War Over Israel, where I think you actually were touching on this, and I just wanted to hear, like, if you could elaborate on that article, that would be great, because it seems to be a little bit different than what we're hearing right now.
Yeah, okay, first of all, like, I super respect that you guys are here, and I super respect what you're going through on your campus. Like, I got my PhD at Berkeley, so I know what Berkeley is like. It is in that tiny percent, and you're doing God's work, and don't let anybody tell you that there's anything wrong with your identity. Like, it's amazing to me. I truly, truly feel for what you're going through, and I think it's really hard, and you're on the front lines, and you're like, I super respect what you're doing and where you're coming from and what your life is like. And I feel pain about it, because, like, this bar experience was extremely shocking for me, just because I had never, like, personally experienced it firsthand, like, being protested myself, like, so I really feel for what that is like on that percent, you know, at these elite institutions where the future leaders of our community are forging their paths. So let's just have a round of applause for the extremity of what you are experiencing does not translate into the numbers of what is happening quantitatively. The If Not Now is a tiny organization. It has a huge impact. Just like the bunch of, just like on Twitter, if you get all your information about American Jewish life from Twitter, you will think that 80% of our community is anti-Zionist. Because what happens is you have these anti-Zionist voices, and they get elevated by non-Jews who want this to be the case, right? Who want the Jewish fig leaf. And so they get elevated and escalated and promoted, and it looks much greater because qualitatively it is so extreme. I know it doesn't help you to hear that you are in a minority going through a very difficult thing. But that's my analysis of the numbers and my analysis and my experience from going to colleges and talking to people who speak at colleges all the time. But I still super have respect for you and what you're going through.
Can I just ask a brief follow-up?
Sure.
So I understand that this might still be a minority of the Jewish population, but it's hard to ignore the fact that these groups, If Not Now and JVP, did not really exist in the same numbers as they are right now, and they didn't have the same presence before as they do now. So there is some sort of growth.
Do you know how many people are in JVP? And a lot of them are actually non-Jews who live in Europe, right? Do you know how many people it is?
I don't know. All I know about is their presence on Berkeley's campus.
It's 15,000. There's 15,000 members of JVP. So again, to you, I have so much compassion for what that must be like, to feel like your very identity is the subject of somebody else's contempt and these horrible protests. But there's 15,000 members of JVP, right? So we have to just keep the numbers. If I was talking to you guys at Berkeley, I would not have been talking about this, because obviously your experience is what we would have been talking about, and how to mediate that, and how to be a proud Jew, and how to cleave to your identity in a way that doesn't make you feel like you have to give something up. That's what we would have talked about.
Yeah, I see that. Sorry, this is going to be my last, and then I'll let someone else go. But these groups, they're having an increased presence in national politics as well. We see it on Bernie Sanders' campaign, and this is getting national attention.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, again, to me, that is Trumpism. That is just how you see the Democratic Party, the far left version of it, the progressive wing, really shaping itself to meet the Trump In so many ways you see this, just like letting him set the agenda and answering in exactly the same tone. And of course they're not the same because he has all this power and they do not. But these voices are getting elevated because of our national politics. And again, like what does that influence actually translate into? It remains to be seen, but I think your influence is going to be the thing we're going to be looking at in 5 years.
Other questions? I'm sorry?
Do I not get my back?
Didn't you give it to them? Yes, over here. No, I'm sorry. The right over here.
I've heard the comment about this increased conservative perspective, the right perspective that we don't hear very frequently. I was wondering if you could spend just a few minutes so that we could hear why should we be proud or feel good about the settlements? You clearly do, and I would like to understand that perspective. I haven't heard a good argument for it, and it would be really helpful to understand why you feel that way.
Why I feel what? Proud?
Well, why? So we have problems
In a minute or less.
in a minute or less. And so I'm not saying you should feel any differently than you. I'm saying I'd like to understand that perspective because I don't hear it. I don't hear it here, and it would be helpful to understand what that looks like. What is the
Great question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question was why. Could she explain why she's proud of the settlements?
So, what's your name? Barbara. I'm going to thank you for your question. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you if I'll explain it in a minute or less. I think that in a minute, okay, just in a minute, if I won't destroy my whole thesis if I do it in a minute, but I was born in Kiryat Arba. When my grandfather founded Kiryat Arba, he did it out of a Zionistic motivation. He said, once we came back to Hebron after the 6 Days Wars, we have to renew the Jewish community that was cut in 1929 in the pogrom of Tarpat. There was a stable, tiny but stable Jewish community in Hebron until 1929. And when he did it, when he came back, so in 48 we weren't lucky to get back to Hebron, but in 67 we did. So now when we're physically back to Hebron, we have to rebuild the Jewish community out of pure Zionism. Now we can discuss hours on this, but I do want you to understand that even if we disagree, and we can elaborate on this, his motivation, and my motivation as well, was pure Zionism, out of the belief that Hebron is, why not Uganda? I mean, this is why we came to Israel, to our ancestors' land. This is the Bible. This is why we're here. Now, it doesn't mean we have no challenges. We do. We have tons of challenges. Okay, there's a big Palestinian population. Once again, we don't have enough time, but I do want you to understand, I hope you'll understand, that his motivation and my brother's motivation is pure Zionism. That's why he's here for that. He's 94 now, thanks God. And he's continuing with, he lives there. My parents live there. Every time I go to my parents, I need to go, to change cars to plastic windows in order not to get to put myself and my kids in a risk because of the stones being thrown on the road. Now, we didn't look for good life. We didn't look for convenient life, like the Chalutzim, like the pioneers in the early 90s. We're not there for conveniency. My grandfather left a brand new house in Holon, in the city of Holon, and moved with his kids with his wife and kids to a small apartment in Kiryat Arba. He didn't look for convenient life. He looked for life of fulfillment, of fulfillment of his ideologic out of pure Zionism. So that's in a glimpse, okay? I don't have enough time, and there are tons of challenges. We can discuss. I'm thinking about it every day. You know, everyone has a hobby. Mine is the conflict. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, although I'm willing to bet that speakers will be happy to answer questions if you come up afterwards. So please, a round of applause for our wonderful panel.